All right, let's get right into it. We're going to jump back to the 17th century to dig into this incredibly powerful and honestly kind of unsettling sermon from a preacher named David Clarkson. Now, this was a time of really intense spiritual thinking, and he asks this huge question: what's the actual difference between just looking religious on the outside and having a real, genuine faith on the inside? And let me tell you, his answer is just as relevant now as it was hundreds of years ago.
So Clarkson builds his entire argument on this one single shocking idea from the Bible. I mean, just try to picture that for a second. People who've spent their whole lives calling on God, doing all these things in His name, they get to the end, and the response they get is, "Sorry, I never knew you. Go away." That's a truly terrifying thought.
And that's the central mystery we're really digging into here. Why? How on earth could so many people who seem so confident they're on the right path be so completely and tragically wrong? Well, Clarkson was convinced he knew why, and it all comes down to a profound case of self-deception.
See, he argued that this woeful mistake, as he called it, it doesn't just happen by accident. Nope. It actually grows from some very specific roots deep down in our hearts and our minds. He basically saw it as a kind of spiritual blindness that has 4 distinct causes.
So here they are, the 4 big roots of this massive deception. First up, you've got simple ignorance. Second, there's a kind of willful negligence. Third is our own natural self-love. And finally, number 4, is a major misunderstanding of who God actually is. And as Clarkson lays it out, each one of these kind of builds on the one before it, creating this powerful and ultimately damning illusion.
So the first root is pretty simple, but it's also profound: ignorance. You know, people think that just saying a prayer or maybe showing up to church every now and then is enough. But Clarkson argues that they just flat out don't know, or maybe they've never seriously thought about what the Bible actually says is required for salvation. And let me tell you, it's pretty intense.
Clarkson points to some really demanding stuff here. Things like being born again, which isn't just turning over a new leaf, it's a complete internal transformation. Having a new heart, meaning the very things you want and care about actually change. He even uses this old word mortification, which basically means a disciplined daily fight against your own worst impulses. This isn't some casual Sunday morning kind of faith. Clarkson is describing an all-out spiritual battle.
The second root? That's negligence. Now, this is for the people who do know what's required. Maybe they've heard sermons just like this one, but they're just too lazy, or maybe too scared to actually hold their own life up to that standard. They refuse to do the hard work of looking in the mirror and being truly honest with themselves.
And this is where Clarkson uses this incredible metaphor to show how dangerous that is. He says that by refusing to check if their hope is real, they are hanging the whole weight of eternity upon a cobweb. Wow. They're betting absolutely everything on something that has no strength, no substance, just hoping it doesn't break.
And that, of course, leads right into the third root, self-love. I mean, this is just basic human nature, right? We are all wired to think well of ourselves. So when we look into what Clarkson calls the mirror of the Word, we don't really want to see the flaws. We instinctively look away from anything that might mess with our comfortable, happy self-image. His description of how this happens is just so vivid. He says, look, Satan might blind one of your spiritual eyes, but it's your own self-love that voluntarily closes the other one. And then sin comes along and just seals them both shut. And the result is you're left totally blind to your real condition, all while being convinced you can see perfectly fine.
And the last root is this really tragic misunderstanding of God Himself. This is kind of the last line of defense for a self-deceived person. They think, okay, maybe I don't quite meet the standard, but God's merciful. He'll just let it slide. They're basically counting on God's mercy to overrule His own truth.
Clarkson just cuts right through that logic with this devastatingly direct question. He asks, do you think He will make Himself a liar that He may make you happy? I mean, you're hoping that God will literally contradict what He's already said, that He'll become a liar just to validate your false hope. When you put it like that, the whole idea just completely falls apart. Okay, now this is where the argument takes a really startling turn. So if doing religious things isn't enough, what about supernatural stuff? What about miracles? Surely those are proof of a real faith, right? Well, according to Clarkson, not so fast. And he does not pull any punches.
He lists these incredible, supernatural signs, people who have had divine visions, people who can prophesy, who can work actual miracles, who can even cast out demons. These are the exact things the people in that opening Bible verse claimed they did, and yet Clarkson reminds us they were still turned away. And then Clarkson drops the bombshell example. Judas Iscariot, yes, that Judas, the man who betrayed Jesus. He was one of the disciples who was given the power to heal the sick and cast out demons. The point is just devastating. If someone could perform those kinds of miracles and still be completely lost, then miracles themselves can't possibly be the ultimate sign of salvation.
All right, so forget miracles. What about knowledge? What if you're a theological genius who can explain all the deepest mysteries of the faith? Well, Clarkson points to the Apostle Paul himself, who wrote that a person could understand all mysteries and all knowledge. But if they don't have love, they are nothing.
So it's this huge contrast, right? On one side, you have the outward appearance. You can master the Bible, you can explain really deep concepts, maybe even describe spiritual experiences perfectly. But on the other side is the reality that Clarkson says is the only thing that matters: a fundamentally new heart, a will that denies its own selfish desires, and a genuine, active love for God and for other people. So after all of this intense diagnosis, where does that leave us? What's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? What's the one thing, according to this sermon, that truly, truly matters?
It all really boils down to this one idea. Genuine faith isn't a checklist. It's not about outward religious actions, or impressive gifts, or how much you know. It is a deep, sincere, and ongoing spiritual transformation. It's something that's marked by that new heart and a completely new direction for your life.
In the end, this whole sermon is basically a giant blazing warning sign. It's cautioning all of us against building our hope for eternity on the shaky ground of superficial religion, on assumptions we've never really examined, or on the comfort of just deceiving ourselves.
And that brings us to the final, really challenging question that Clarkson's sermon just forces us to ask ourselves. When you look at your own life, is your confidence based on the things you do, the prayers you say, the knowledge you have, the religious stuff you perform, or is it based on the person you are fundamentally becoming on the inside? It's a question that's definitely worth thinking about.